Welcome to a very special episode of the Startup Operator. My guests today don't fit the typical definition of startup founders, but what they're working on is super relevant to our audience, and I thought we should definitely talk. So I have Harish and Ramanand, who together founded Choose to Think in 2014 as a means to help individuals and teams uplevel themselves. A lot of their work focuses on being future ready, but from a very unique perspective. So I can't wait to understand more. Welcome, Harish and Ramanand. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Roshan.
Thanks, Roshan. Thanks for having us.
So Choose to Think is, what do I call it? Is it an initiative, a project, a startup, a movement? How do you define Choose to Think?
We're also trying to figure that out.
Right.
I think what we've done, I think this is in the spirit of being future relevant, that the future builds on the past. So in some sense, not fitting into a label is both, we see it more as a feature than a bug. In the sense that we've borrowed, I think, elements from the world of startups, the world of consulting, the world of, individual, gig freelancers as well. I think a lot of those elements come from different places, and we haven't really said that since it doesn't fit into a mold, we should reject it. Instead, we've just, I think, building the car as we ride the journey, as it were. So the car looks a little odd and different. So we're comfortable.
Right. Yeah, I think it also fits with my pet theory that quizzers have a fascinating outlook to life, because I mean you have these various realms in your head, right? I mean, you have these frames of references from, it could be cricket or it could be geography and etc. And you guys have a different way of looking at it. So for those who are listening, Harish and Ramanand are avid quizzers as well, right? So Harish, on a daily basis, what is it that you guys do?
Yeah, so we work with both individuals as well as with corporate clients. So for individuals, we have something called as CTQ compounds, where we help people build a daily habit of reading, something which is sustainable. We also help people get better at future relevance through something called as future stack. So these are things which are primarily meant for individuals. So a lot of the start of the day actually goes in making sure all these people have got their reading articles for the day and things like that. Whereas as we get into the day, it gets more of the work with our corporate clients, where we are doing everything from consulting to helping them engage with their employees, a little bit of learning. Little bit of things around how to design different events that they have. Some places where we actually deliver those events, some places where we will just give design inputs. So all of that goes on the corporate side. So yeah, every day is, part of it is very similar. It gets, repeated the next day. But a lot of that is very dynamic, keeps changing. A lot of our engagements with these clients are also such that sometimes I keep using the word, it's like the roving midfielder role in football, right? You have to play number 10, number 9, sometimes go back to your box and defend as well. So yeah, right. It can go into any of these areas. So that's how our day goes, like most of us.
Right. So you mentioned, you work with individuals and with institutions or corporates, right? So let's talk about your work with individuals. And, one of the things that you do is inculcate a reading habit as such. Do you want to talk us through how that happens?
Yeah, Raman, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So I think the broader, just connecting it back to future relevance, we've often heard of, the whole notion of compounding, and this is established in the world of investing and finance. And and it is the investing community in some sense that has taught us the value of compounding in other realms. So most famously, people like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger have spoken about the compounding nature of knowledge. And they famously said about, talked about reading 500 pages a week and how that helps you compound over time. So I think we took a cue from that, and we are looking at this from what is it that helps compound, or what are the strengths that can compound for individuals over time. Reading is one example, and reading is something that I think for someone like Harish and me, it is part of our operating system for a long time, because and that's what leads to quizzing, further reading, leads to further discovery, the kind of people we hang out with. It's a very natural state of affairs for us. For a lot of people, that is not really true, or for them, it has given way to other pursuits. And so, therefore, we were actually building the system for ourselves. We said that we are all readers, but one thing that we really lack is width and diversity. So, if Harish is, if his favorite sports are football, his roving midfielder metaphor will come from football, right? So, is there a way for him to look at analogies from outside that and broaden his perspectives? Similarly, for me, it could be a different set of things. So, I think reading, quizzing, these pursuits have been compounding pursuits for us. So, a few years ago, we decided to try and deliberately build a reading system for ourselves. And that's what led to what we do for others. The idea is quite simple. If you look at why, what should you read every day? The biggest thing that people reach out for is a book. And books are of varying sizes. Some books should probably just be a blog post. So you have all these variants with books, and people often these days don't get through books. There are other competing reasons for that. So what we did was we said we'll curate a set of articles for, it began with ourselves and now we do that for others. We curate articles that are reasonably short, something that you can get through in one sitting, say 15 minutes or so. And there is a different choice every day. And here is also where it's almost the opposite of something like Netflix or the abundance economy, right? We don't give you abundance. We say this is the one thing that you should read today. You read it, and you've done at least 15 minutes of reading today, and whatever else happens in your day, that is an achievement for the day. And then we build things into it. We are into habit design, behavioral design. So we brought in elements of peer, positive peer design, small groups. When I think what we've realized over time is when you have committed people who opt in, and the groups are well designed and well moderated, these things are something that you can do every day, and you don't have to struggle through or a book, and kind of think that a reading habit is not for you. It is more of a system that's missing rather than something wrong with you. So that's an example of something that we built first for ourselves, and now then people started knocking on our doors and said, "This is interesting. Can we be part of it?" And that's how the CTQ compounds offerings were born.
Right. That's very interesting, because reading is one of those things. I think 9 out of 10 people will say that they would want to read more, right? But however, it's one of those things that often gets left behind, especially in the world that we live in, where there's a lot more rich media. There's plenty of other distractions available, and so on. So let's take a step back and figure why someone has to read, right? And Harish, you might want to step in here. Why is it essential for, let's say, an IT industry professional, or someone else doing something that may not be connected with with the arts or whatever it is? Why is it necessary for him or her to read?
Yeah. So, going back to the famous, Steve Jobs quote of connecting the dots, right? The more dots you keep collecting, it's so much easier for you to then look backwards and connect. You will always connect those dots backwards, right? When you are collecting those dots, you will never know,
Yeah.
whether this is something which is going to immediately give you some, so-called ROI. So then it becomes a question of as many different domains and as many different viewpoints that you can add to your mental models, right? As you keep adding them, it slowly coalesces over a period of time, and that's when you can start drawing those analogies from different worlds and try to make sense of what's happening. Earlier, it was probably easier to get away without reading too much because there were set things that you were expected to do, and you could just keep doing, you just deliver what is expected of you, and you'll be fine, right? There's job security and all of that. But now with the world changing at such a rapid pace, and all domains are actually intersecting with each other, and it's I wouldn't even say this is something which only the forward-looking people should be doing. Now this is almost part of making sure you have job security, because now it is expected of you to make those connections, right? And in everything from how you actually improve the way you are delivering in your job, and since you said IT professionals, to even what clients are expecting from these guys. You absolutely need to know what's happening in different domains. Can you draw some ideas, draw some inspiration from a completely unrelated domain like sports or media, and fit that into the world of finance, right? And these are things which you just need to do. I mean, I don't think it's a question of it's not a choice anymore, right? I think this should be part of the job requirement for people to add these different sources in their curiosity diet. And I wouldn't say reading is the only medium of doing it. I'm perfectly fine with someone actually consuming information in the form of podcasts, interesting podcasts. There could be videos. There could be any of these media formats as well, right? But having that breadth, having that variety in their curiosity is extremely important. And I think that's where having that system also becomes very imperative, because otherwise you'll tend to just stick to the things that somebody has recommended. Oh, Roshan has said this is good, I'll go and check that out, and that's it. Till the next time Roshan actually recommends something to me, I'm waiting. So that cannot be the case. So reading, I would say, assume it as consumption of knowledge in various formats. Reading is great. Reading, it comes naturally to a lot of people. But yeah, if you're listening to podcasts, do that as well. But keep looking for variety.
So I just wanted to add to what Harish said. We think that being systematically curious is a big component of your future relevance. It so happens that a lot of material is in the form of the written text, especially the so-called Lindy texts, right? Stuff that has been around for a long time and is in the form of books. So reading is a kind of a muscle that helps you access that. However, as Harish said, we are not very anal about reading. I think if you can get it from a really good podcast, more power to you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it, right? I mean, the most obvious means of utility from reading is like, you're able to access some kind of knowledge and you're able to reference it maybe in a conversation or something that you do. But if you look at it from a higher order perspective, I think it alters your mode of thinking, right? Because I can remember one or two books that completely altered my mode of thinking, like Taleb, for example. I can, I'm not exaggerating, but there is one me pre skin in the game and there's one me post skin in the game, right? It completely alters your mode of thinking in everything that you do, right? So I think that is a true pursuit in terms of reading and rereading. Actually, I tend to reread a lot of the stuff as well, and I'm sure, and I've heard this from plenty of other people who read for context as such. Ramanand, I want to pick up on something that Harish mentioned, which is the curiosity diet, right? And you referenced it as well. What is this curiosity diet?
So just like you have a diet for food, which takes different parts of nutrition, taste. Sometimes you're just consuming for pleasure. So the idea is to have some kind of balance, some kind, while you have your vitamins, you're getting your doses of sugar as well. So I think it helps to think of curiosity in the same way. So I think that's where the analogy can be made that you read pleasure, you read or you listen to a podcast because you want to stay abreast of developments in your domain. So it really helps to unpack your plate or your thali and look at it. Am I getting my news in the right quality? Because I think in the last decade or so, a lot of people have realized that news isn't always very good for us. And we were always, as a generation, I think our curiosity diet was news on newspapers, in terms of your school textbooks, your libraries. They set the agenda for your curiosity diet. But I think we've realized that how the media operates, how even social media operates. So if your curiosity diet, in some sense, or the information that you get is all of these unhealthy carbs, or dopamine equivalent of sugar, and so on and so forth, then who's setting the agenda for your diet? So I think it helps to look at it with the same analogy. And over time, I think what the smarter people have done, they've learned to take charge of their diet. They have a little bit of the fun, the sugar, the kinds of things, but they have consciously taken out certain things from it. So I think it helps to look at what are you consuming, why are you consuming it, how is it keeping you healthy? Is this for tomorrow? Is this for the pleasure of today? So that's what we mean by a curiosity diet.
Right. And it's not just from a utility perspective, but even from an entertainment perspective. I mean, we're just constantly bombarded by things that may not be relevant to us at all. So much so that it dims the experience of something that could actually be interesting. There's a certain sense of fatigue once we've moved from this scarcity to abundance era that we're living in, right? I mean, literally, you scroll down your Twitter feed and you have 20 or 30 pieces of information staring you in the face, right? Everything from something that happened in Syria to something that happens in Kormangla fourth block or something, right? It's just a very wide range to digest and assimilate. I feel, right? So
and it also does change the way you think, like you rightly said. Changes the way you think as well as the way you feel. So just your diet can do that for you. Curiosity, information can do that for you as well.
Yeah, I realized this, about 3 or 4 years back, when I was having almost a physical reaction to things that I was reading on my Twitter, right? And I caught myself feeling a certain way, and I decided to just curate my Twitter timeline since. I mean, unfollowed a bunch of people, muted people, blocked people, whatever, blocked a few words, and so on and so forth. And since then, I mean, I can attest to the fact that I'm a lot saner. I mean, I at least I don't have that visceral sort of reaction to seeing something, right? Which can actually be pretty harmful in many ways. So Harish, in this sort of a dopamine heavy world that we live in, how do we choose to curate what we consume?
Yeah. So I think it boils down to being deliberate about everything that you are doing, right? We tend to set some lofty goals, from time to time for the next year or next 6 months or whatever, where we at least look at a broad division of what are the kind of things that we are looking at. I think Raman has an excellent post as well about that, which I'll fish out and I'll send that across to you. You can add that in the show notes. But generally, if you can look at, what are the timeless things that you want to, know about. There are always, some things that you ought to know, but, you should have probably known them when you were 20 or 25. But yeah, for whatever reason, you did not read them or you did not get to know them. You did not learn them. So you're always playing catch up there. And it's not going to, get covered in 1 year. So just sort of, temper your ambition there. You're not going to finish all of that in this year. But at least if you make up, at least 20% progress, I think that is great, right? Because you're still going to be behind the curve in many other topics. So if you make those kind of buckets where there's this timeless wisdom, there are these things that you should have known in your interest areas, or you wanted to at some point, but somehow you didn't make the time or you didn't find the resources back then, right? Look at those things. There are always some great pieces of work that are coming in from authors / podcasters, which are currently being shipped out, right? In this year, in the next year or whatever. So having an eye on what are the things that are going to come out, have space for that, and then leave some space for serendipity, leave some space for a completely random topic, right? For me, probably some taxidermy might be something that is completely, left of field at this point of time. But yeah, you can learn something from there as well. So leave some space for that as well. And then if there's still some time left, some space left, then you leave that for all the things that get the outrage factories going. That's how I look at it.
Right. No, that's a very important point you mentioned about serendipity, because I think, anytime you talk about a more structured consumption habit or reading habit, people tend to think that, okay, I mean, you will recommend that you read Marcus Aurelius, 7 hours a day, right? And, meditate on those pithy quotes and whatnot, or maybe pick up The Economist or whatever. But yeah, I mean, serendipity is super important, I would say. I mean, recently I started reading this book called The Body by Bill Bryson. And
Right.
it's just so out of left field, I mean, it's something that I would absolutely not pick up, but because I like Bryson, I picked it up, and it's just literally what it is. It's the body, and he talks about various, functions and whatnot, and it's just filled with so many interesting nuggets, and so much of it leaves you with a sort of an awe, in terms of man. I mean, how the hell are we alive, right? So we're just really special creatures in that sense. So, really sorry for the interruption. I'm just going to take a minute of your time to talk to you about something amazing. Move fast, break things. All of that is great advice for when you have nothing to lose. But once you have some base of users and customers, you cannot really afford to risk quality. So how do you still ship at lightning pace and delight your users and customers at the same time? Now that's where Bagasura comes in. Bagasura is a super easy way for people to give and take feedback about the product, and most importantly, close the loop. If you work in a design team, you know screenshots suck. But with Bagasura, you can actually get people to give you very contextual and accurate feedback about your UI and your UX. If you work in a QA team, you know 90% of your time goes in reproducing bugs. But with Bagasura, you can get people to reproduce bugs, document test cases, and resolve things all within Jira itself. Bagasura is being used by some of the leading design and QA teams around, and it's brought to you by the good folks at Mulia Testing, which is one of the best software and QA firms in the world. Do check out bagasura.io, that's BUGASURA.io, and sign up for a demo today. Ship fast and ship well. In that sense. So, reading is one aspect of it. The other is like, absorbing this and, really gleaning wisdom from it, right? Because I do know people who do 40 books a year, 50 books a year, maybe higher, and so on, right? And they're voracious readers, but I often wonder, how do you absorb so much of information? I mean, there are the 1% of the 1% types, or who've been reading for a while, who have that sort of mental model to, glean the right things from whatever they consume, and, curate it for when it might be useful for some time going forward. But Ramanand, like for an average Joe like me, who probably does, I don't know, 15, 20 books a year, let's say, right? How do I figure a way to absorb the information from whatever I read and also have it ready for future reference?
Right. So I think first of all, let's dispel the notion that quantity has anything to do with it. So, you might be reading 15, 20 books a day, a year, and it might be the best 15 in your life. So I think we should set the quantity point aside. And you're right that, absorption is, or making, or the act of connecting those dots that Harish mentioned earlier is as equally important next once you've collected them. So one example I can give you is I mentioned our own reading system that we built for ourselves. So it's been actually over 1,000 days that we've done this, of reading one article about a book every day, a book summary every day. What we instituted after the first 100 days to kind of raise the bar for ourselves was to get everyone to reflect a little bit on that summary. So everyone posts one takeaway every day from the book. It's a small slice of a summary of a book, but what it does is it turns your mind into more active gear. And so, as there is an input component to curiosity, if you have an output side to it as well. In the case of some people, it is maybe blogging about it. In some cases, it is teaching someone or making a summary of the book in your own words. And in fact, one of the things that we offer to some of our clients is a quizified version of a book. So we'll say you come, we'll put this together for you in an hour. What it makes us do is kind of really get into the heart of the book and turn it into something and try and distill the essence of it. So exercises like that just get you to engage with the material at a far greater depth than if you're just reading it cover to cover and it's just a conquest on your bedpost in a sense, and you've moved on to the next item in your bookshelf. So that putting yourself in an environment that gets you to deeply engage with the material, because you have to you do it as a commitment to someone else, or you're part of a group of people that makes you do that, or like what you do, right? You've committed to put out a certain rate of episodes. It makes you look for people, talk to them, engage with them, and I think that I think is a great way of absorption. There are other compounding habits like note taking and things like that as well, but I think the principle remains the same, that get something out from what you took in.
Right. Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, so I just pick up pieces of what I read and explain it to my wife, and uh, simple things like that. I find it kind of distills your learning from whatever you read, right, and whatever you read and consume.
And I just wanted to add two things. One is that since we spoke about Taleb, we've taken a cue from Fooled by Randomness and said you can be fueled by and since
Right.
another great master, I think a lot of people like to quote, is Richard Feynman. And Feynman's
Right.
famously is to kind of explain to a younger version or someone who
Right.
will know that.
To be able to derive everything, right?
Yeah. So I think that's where the power of someone like Bill Bryson comes in, because he's like a one-man index who takes you to different parts of the world. To complement the body, I would also recommend to you a book called
Short History of Nearly Everything.
It's about the house. Okay.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Bill Bryson's book about a house, wherein he visits each room in the house and explains why did we end up with a kitchen. Why did we have salt and pepper on our tables and not say cumin and cardamom? So I think people like that are great role models in terms of assimilating and then explaining to others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things that you guys referenced also is the future stack, right? And while reading is one pretty integral thing to it, I'm sure there are other components as well. So Harish, what are these other essentials in the future stack that you would recommend?
Yeah. So in fact, the idea of future stack comes from this book by Scott Adams, where he talks about, how do I fail at almost everything and something. It's a very long title,
Fantastic
but yeah. So he talks about, some of these skills, and he says it's much better for someone to be, good at a multiple skills rather than being this one trick pony, right? And he's listed down these things which we thought were like some of these timeless skills that you can have, as it should probably be in the list that the World Economic Forum also puts out for future relevance. So these are excellent ones, right? Like public speaking, some amount of design, accounting, right? Everyone needs some bit of accounting, or at least appreciation and understanding of accounting. So again, if you go back to the to the book by David Epstein called Range, where he talks about some of these champions who actually have had exposure to multiple sports and multiple fields as well, from Vincent Van Gogh to Federer actually playing football and cricket and other sports before zeroing down on tennis. So you actually get to pick from these different skills and different areas, and then you can really be very good at one thing. If you apply that to the realm of, say, knowledge workers or corporate professionals that we are looking at these days, right? They tend to, again, put their blinkers on, and either they're very good at marketing or they're very good at sales, technology, one of these things. But if you look at the CXOs, in fact, in many of these companies, these CXOs actually move from, say, an HR role to a finance role to a CEO role later, right? Why do they do that? Because they're able to, bring that knowledge from different functions, and that's what makes them these better leaders. So how can we, build that exposure, be getting their hands dirty with some aspects. And these days, it's so many different things having having an impact on your career, on your day-to-day life in these organizations. You need to know about everything from persuasion to no code to sustainability to storytelling. All these things are important. Of course, given your work life and lifestyle, you will probably not be able to do a 12 to 16 week deep dive into each of these areas immediately. But what you can definitely do is have a bit of exposure, get your hands dirty, do some small things. You at least know something about these things, so that if and when the time comes for you to do that deep dive, you are not starting from zero or from the negative, right? You actually have some idea about how these different areas impact your career, what you ought to be thinking about. We work with a lot of corporates these days. So the in thing these days is to think about AI, ML in everything that they're doing, right? So somebody who's working in HR will be tasked by the CEO or the site head saying, "Oh, why aren't we using AI, ML in recruitment?" And this person has absolutely no idea, what to do there, right? So that's where having that exposure, and then what are the options for you? Your options are, if you are in HR and if you've never had any exposure to technology and you've been just given this, almost like a directive that, yeah, we need to have AI ML in our recruitment process in the next 2 years, right? Are you going to go and take up a course on Coursera on AI ML? That's going to be too much, for that person to get started with, right? So that's where getting that, the right kind of, content which will expose that concept, just get them started, and the relevance of that particular topic in their area. If they can get that, then they can get started, and they could eventually go and take up that course that we're talking about. But that should not be the first thing that they get started with. So these are all aspects that helped us start thinking about this idea of future stack. So how can you build a talent stack which will help you stay relevant in the future? So that's where the word future stack also comes from. And so that's that's the future stack offering that we have, where we have people again from a very diverse background, right? We have somebody who's probably 50 plus, who has spent his life in as a technology leader, and is now exploring different areas just so that he knows, okay, where's my next career going to come from? To somebody who's in HR, to someone who's a hardcore, engineer. There are, these varying backgrounds that people have, who are, in some cases, they're taking that step in a very proactive manner, right? It's not like their hand has been forced as of now to start thinking about, their next pivot in their career or whatever, but they know that this is something which they need to do to stay relevant, and that's what they're doing with FutureStack.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think corporate careers for a while. I mean, we've all been straitjacketed, right? And it's sort of liberating to kind of see these cross-functional sort of roles evolve as well. Because I mean, if you look at it in our personal lives, I mean, there is some element of finance that all of us have to know. There's some element of health and wellness that all of us have to know. There's some amount of psychology that all of us invariably pick up, right? And we're very sort of multi-dimensional people. But then somehow for a long while, once we stepped into the office, we were software engineer 3 or quality assurance 4 or whatever it was, right? And it's good to see that this sort of a cross functional sort of a skill set stack is evolving, right? So Ramanand, if I was, let's say, a startup guy, um, what are 3 or 4 skill sets that I should pick up in order to be better, in order to be future proof, and in order to be way more effective at whatever I do?
Right. So as a startup person, you're probably, your mindset is probably in the right place already in terms of, you're a little more tuned in, you're a little more agile. I think that gives a lot of us the base. But I think what startup folks often get wrong is they've adopted different set of blinkers. For some of them, it is all about tech. For some of them, it is about raising funds. So everybody, I think that is you don't want to swap one set of, tunnel vision for another. I think given what we're seeing around us, one, the nature of, media, the nature of, investing these days, I think at least all of these are hypotheses. You kind of add these to your stack and you pull them out as a Swiss army knife from time to time. So I think in that we would definitely put skills like storytelling, because the reach that you get with a well-told story these days is phenomenal. The second is persuasion skills. I think the great entrepreneurs already knew that or figured that out along the way. But I think now you can go and learn persuasion in a very tangible, concrete fashion. And I think to sell, you have to be a great persuader. And someone like me who came from a research background, had no exposure to sales. Now I have to stand on the street and in some sense and, attract attention and get stuff sold. So how do I contribute? Maybe I don't do that. That might not be my full-time role, but as a part of a small organization, I have to throw my weight behind that wheel. So I think persuasion is the other thing. It also comes in handy in terms of getting people to go along with you. I think it's hugely underrated. I think a lot of new media literacy skills have come in. So what we are doing right now, I don't think I didn't know I would have done this 5 years ago because the tools were not democratized enough. There wasn't enough of a sort of platforms that helped you get your message out. So I think this new media literacy, as we would probably call it, being able to come on a podcast, being able to run your own a video show, as it were, maybe even making a persuasive pitch over video, which is a different combination of skills.
Yeah.
In 2020 has become extremely relevant, right? So some of these have become, I think, almost, something that you have to have as a professional, whether it be a startup professional or not. I think the last thing is habits that help you stay a good entrepreneur. And I think I'll turn it back to what you said earlier about health, about finances. You still cannot take the eye off the ball when it comes to that. So how do you integrate these habits as part of your life? So you're not burnt out. You're not looking at a balance that is depleting. All those kinds of things, I think, will still continue to be relevant for an entrepreneur in the future.
Yeah. No,
I would add one more thing. One more thing there. A lot of so I've been talking to some of my batchmates from my B school, and we've just completed 18, 19 years out of the B school. And I was asking them, what did you learn in the last 20 years, right? So the one thing that has been consistent across everyone that I spoke to is that we should have probably given more importance and attention to the so-called HR courses back when we were in B school, because they realized that after the first 4 or 5 years, everything that they did was actually it had to do with people. So just understanding people. And understanding these cognitive biases and what makes people think in certain ways, is something which people sort of stumble upon after a period of time, right? But given so much of work that has already been put out, and the kind of interesting things that people have done in terms of studies, you don't really need to take all that time to actually figure that out yourself over 2 decades. But you can actually short circuit that by learning about these things, because whether you are working in a startup which is building bots to be working with only bots, you still need humans to work with. Either you are selling to humans or you're working with humans. And that's something which I have seen is usually a late realization. People feel that, oh, I should have started giving attention to this much earlier. So yeah, that's one more thing that I would say, for people in the startup world to know more about understanding these biases and how people think. A lot of that feeds into things like persuasion and storytelling, because that's what you're leveraging upon. But yeah, just understanding people and understanding how they think is one area that people should definitely be doing more of.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in startups, there is this whole cliche of the whole Steve Jobs moniker, right? I mean, I am right, I know it, you better follow me sorts. And people fail to realize that there was one Steve Jobs, right? And there is probably going to be one Mark Zuckerberg, right? And for the rest, 99.9999, whatever percentage of us, it's important for us to drive consensus. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere, really. And to me, I mean, the light bulb moment for me was, reading a little bit about David Caldini and seeing how persuasion itself can be a skill. It's a science, right? And you don't have to fight these all or nothing battles, right? I mean, you can learn to negotiate where literally both of you can win, right? So seeing these things has been a sort of a revelation for me. Uh, you might also be running into who we call Gen Zs or millennials, right? And obviously they have a different whole other mindset altogether, right? Harish, I wonder if you can take us through how the Gen Zs and the millennials are looking at some of these things in terms of their career, in terms of building skills and so on.
Yeah. So, again, we've seen these people, when we actually try to sell to someone in the corporate world, usually they are these CXOs, CHROs, who are of a certain vintage. And the one thing that they're really scared of is, oh, these, 20 somethings who are coming in who have absolutely no respect for, our principles of work, and, their lifestyle is very different, and all of that. But, in our experience, there are some things which remain common, right? There may be probably more allegiance to self than to the organization, but also it's equally true that if the organization is espousing certain values which are in sync with what they believe in, then there is this much stronger connection than it was. And I'm this is a much broader generic sweep that I'm making right now. It wouldn't have been that much strong on the values front for, say, the 40-year-olds, right? Where they would say, yeah, this is something just for public consumption, but and work is different and I'm different, as a person. But for these 20 somethings, probably if the values that the organization stands for are what are in sync with their values, then there's going to be a lot more, of that bonding, and they are going to, probably give a lot more. And there are other things which have always been true, right? In terms of you give people the autonomy, you let people, take their own decisions. They will always have, better drive. To go ahead and do something like that. The advantage here is that these people are seeking that kind of autonomy right from the beginning. Probably for the earlier demographic, you were not sure whether you should be giving that autonomy. How will that autonomy be taken? And on the receiver side also, they were not sure whether they want that autonomy. They were better off, being directed in a certain way. Out here, it's very simpler in that sense that they are asking for that autonomy. You better give me that autonomy. You give them that autonomy, and see how things are going, right? And also given the forces that are at work, like things like gig economy coming in, and we earlier spoke about so many different areas now having a direct impact in every career. That's where I think these people who are graduating and who are just joining workforces, now they are already thinking in those lines. So it's not something which is switch for them, right? So they're much more at home dealing with these kind of landscape in the organization than the others who probably require a little bit of stability. Okay, let me know how my year is going to look like, is something that people of a certain age are going to ask. Whereas these people will probably not going to say let me know, because they want to take it that way. They're not expecting someone else to tell how their year should look like, and they're okay to embrace whatever is going to come in next. These are sort of broad generalizations that I have made, but I think they're quite fair assumptions to make in terms of how these people look at work, and and this is obviously the reason why there's so much of tension as well, because a lot of the decision making authority figures in some of these companies, at least the bigger companies, are still slightly from a vintage, whereas the people who are actually doing are all of this kind of a mindset. So yeah, there's this perennial conflict.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. To my mind, it's a little bit of a dichotomy actually, because when I run into people who are 23, 24, they want to be really mission driven and so on. But at the same time, I don't see that sort of an investing for the long term, right? Or investing in compounding as such. Assets. So it's a bit of a, I mean, it's a very tough challenge to solve for managers and leaders itself. So Ramanand, if you are a manager, if you're a leader at a startup, right? So how do you invest in your words, up-leveling some of these people? What do you invest in, and how do you enable the transition for them?
Right. So I think what you said is absolutely true, and it's not just for youngsters. Even the middle level folks that we speak to, our entire mental map, right from if you've lived in India or you've lived in broadly this generation of the last 20 years, you have some exposure to options, but you still, I think, hold stability. You still hold people telling you that get that job first. All those things are still very closely ingrained around us. So I'm not going to dismiss people for missing that. Also, we are humans. I think we prefer the immediate return to the long term, the difference of reward. So with any form of compounding, the results come at the end, and all you see until then is a slow drip of something happening. So, so therefore, what managers should do, or anyone like us who's trying to get someone else to change their mindset or get them to up level, is to first accept that this is a natural state of affairs, and we shouldn't necessarily label them or dismiss them as slow or backward looking and things like that. So that is the first the battle to win with, and it's more of a personal battle to win. The second is, I think, in the spirit of show and don't tell, is to be a model. I think a lot of people, if they model the behavior that they want others to adopt, especially people who look up to them, I think if you want to, and we say this to parents, we say this to leaders, if you want people to read, you pick up a book first. You have that book lying around you. You start talking about what's great in a book, and let the others follow. I think the third part is just the power of the corporate treadmill or any kind of treadmill in pulling people along. I think in 2020 we've seen what happens when that treadmill comes to a halt, right? Because a lot of things that happen to you at work are because you're part of the system that just takes you along with it. So how do you design an environment or a system wherein this really becomes a very natural part of that? So for instance, if you are, some people do these internal talks on future oriented topics. They'll invite a speaker, they'll get someone from within to speak about it. Just ensuring it survives for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and not doesn't fizzle out, which is often the where a lot of these initiatives go and die. If you focus on making sure that their systems are sustainable, you constantly have uh, them running every month, every year, whatever it is that it's your cadence. I think that those things pay off. So to summarize, be that model. Don't label people too early, and build these new treadmills that take you along, even whether you realize it or not.
Right. And for some of the managers or leaders who are listening, right, how should they measure these outcomes? As Ramanand rightly put it, I mean, you have to invest for the long term. But Harish, how do they know that the habits that they're forming, or they're investing in their team and so on, right, is showing some measure of success, or that they're pointed in the right direction? What would be some milestones in your opinion? Because some of these things, like for example, reading, and some of the talent stack that you mentioned, I mean, it may not be very obvious for people in such a way that, hey, I mean, this is stuff that I can apply on Monday morning, right? So how do managers and leaders learn to sort of understand, where their team's headed and if they're headed in the right direction?
Yeah. So I don't think there is any measure that you can use and apply for something like this, and that in itself is the reason why these things don't get taken up, right? All the things that make a disproportionate, give you that disproportionate advantage are long term, take time, and it's almost impossible to measure. How can you actually measure knowledge? It's impossible, right? But yeah, you then tend to use some proxy saying, oh, somebody has actually done this, whatever, class 12 plus engineering. So some knowledge would have got, accumulated. Is a proxy that you're just making. It's a leap of faith, because over the years, it's been drilled into your brain that this leads to some accumulation of knowledge. So let me take this guy who is passed out from this college or whatever, and because all of this has happened in the past, this person will now deliver in my organization. So it's more or less a leap of faith that you're making everywhere else as well, right? And that's where the challenge is with building all these habits that Raman was talking about earlier, that you don't have that corresponding measure, corresponding metric that you can look at. And because now it's so easy for the bean counters to actually start questioning, okay, now what's the return on this, right? So you'll say, even people who have a little bit of conviction in that, they'll say, but I have other battles to fight. I'm not going to pick up this one more battle to try and convince these people that this is important. And that's where, that's how all these things go down the drain. You've started some, series of talks, you invited 4 people, and then you run out of energy, you run out of people within your immediate network, and you say, oh, let's just, there's nobody to own this initiative in my company, and that's where it drops. Now, it's so easy for someone like Steve Jobs to say that, I'm going to connect the dots, and, this typography class that I took back in college is why I made the iPod. Or why I'm so important, design is so important in Mac. So you'll say, that's one Steve Jobs, and you are again looking at all these things like survivorship bias and confirmation bias. All these biases are coming in because you're talking about Steve Jobs. What is that manager in this company who has some 50 people reporting to her? How is she going to say that no, all these books that people need to read, it is important, and they have to consume this? It's impossible to have a measure there. And I think that's where the leaders need to make that leap of faith and say that yes, these are things that are important. With things like vitamins or any healthy food, do you actually get a return the next day, right? But still you take them. You take the medicines when you are in a hospital, and that those are the ones which can immediately show you some return that I'm getting rid of my pain or whatever. But all the other things that you do, it takes time. So you should not try to manufacture a metric just for the sake of it, because it is not going to it's not going to do justice to what people are looking for when they ask for this metric. Is my take on it.
Yeah. I think it's also a lot to do with culture as well, right? Simple things like, having a library in your office, for example, sends the right signals, also inculcates the sort of
Correct.
behaviors that you want to see in your team. Having an open forum or a talks sort of a feature on a weekly, fortnightly basis, getting people to learn, to share, maybe do book reviews and so on and so forth. Small little things that, really add to everything that people are doing. But the broader point, I think, what I can glean from both of you is that you need holistic individuals. You don't need machines. Machines will do machines' work, right?
Yeah.
You need a lot more holistic individuals, and that is why all of these complementing skill sets, which may not be so obvious to sort of even be there in that realm, right, are important. So Ramanand, over the last 6 years, what are some anecdotes, what are some outcomes that you've seen, right, some transformations in people that come to mind?
Right. So I think, looking back, quite a few of these unexpected events that have happened to us come to mind. So, for instance, in our compounds, we recently, one of our the reading batches that we had, the first one completed about 500 days recently. And I think
Wow.
for people in that group, uh, they kind of looked back and said, we've read like if it started on the first day and started reading War and Peace, we would have done it by now, right? So I mean, they kind of just some of them were a little surprised at how far they had come. And I think we were also not really expecting some of these milestones to go by, like our 1,000-day journey, because by the end of the 1,000-day journey, it was quite a it was just another day in the life of Choose to Think. So I think that was one thing that instantly came to mind. I think in corporate settings, one thing that we are happy to have contributed to from this holistic point of view, right? So a client that we worked with, they have been winning an award around innovation. So we've been helping them with fostering innovation, and I think a lot of these things have been about how do you persuade more people to take part in internal innovation when you're really not getting the innovators prize, right? Which in the outside world, someone who's working in a startup is doing it for a big pot of gold. But in a corporate environment, that pot of gold is a lot more tempered. It comes in the form of visibility, in the form of better prospects, being labeled and seen as an inventor. So a lot of work went into getting people drawn into some of these programs, getting them to listen to some of these interesting concepts. So a lot of people in these worlds have not heard of people like Taleb, for instance, right? And risk is such a huge part of any form of innovation. So these are the kinds of things, and when people now we see them confidently talking on stage, kind of building, stitching together, some idea that they came up with, and taking it to fruition. We've had a few of these cases along the way, and I think uh, over time, given a broad enough horizon, I think what happens is that you get so habituated to the system that you rarely notice these milestones going by. It becomes like yet another day in the life of Choose to Think. So I don't know if Harish has any other anecdotes to add.
Yeah, I think very similar. I mean, there've been a couple of people in our reading compounds, where they have actually had their spouses also join after a certain point of time, because they said the spouse was wondering what is really changing you, what is this which is responsible for this change in this person, and they said, oh, this is why it is happening. Why don't you also join, right? So I think that was a very heartening thought for us, that something like reading and something like this being done over a period of time is actually making a change in someone, how they think and how they work and how they lead their life. eventually that's what you are looking at. I'm sure everyone who writes a book or creates any content, a podcast or a book, is actually looking at some kind of change, right? Some kind of change in terms of thinking, of doing work or whatever. We've managed to do that with a few people. Nothing better than that.
Fantastic. Right. So we're almost at the end of the podcast, and I would be remiss not to ask book recommendations from you guys. Right. I know you can, give us a whole litany of things that we could look up. Right. But I'm going to limit it to three. Your top three recommendations, and maybe you could focus to our audience as well of startup operators, founders, investors, and whoever is listening. Right. So we can begin with Ramanand. Your top three books that everyone should read.
Thanks, Roshan, for taking me first, because I know dreading going second and having this blank, asked to recommend, you just go blank. My number one pick these days is Alchemy by Rory Sutherland, the ad man and who works at Ogilvy, because I think he's done a fascinating job of drawing influences. I think he's the perfect example of why one should literally have an open mind. My second recommendation, which is I think by now an all-time personal favorite, is Thinking Fast and Slow. Again, one of those books that have changed my life the way I think. There is again a version of me before the book, like you said, and a version after that. The third book, I would have said Factfulness, but I know Harish will want to say that. I think I will go with the Scott Adams book, How to Fail at Everything and Still Win Big. That I think is again a very fascinating book in terms of how you can be seemingly ordinary but still try and have a shot at an extraordinary life.
Right. Harish?
Yeah. So Factfulness, like Ramanand said, I think is again one of those books. Thinking Fast and Slow is like zeroth book, okay, for us. We start with that. So, we consider it as like a must read for everyone. So Factfulness is one. Power of Moments is another one that we are big fans of, again by Chip and Dan Heath. Almost every book that they have written, whether it's Made to Stick or Decisive, or great books. But Power of Moments, I thought, was something which is very relevant for the kind of audience that you just mentioned, because a lot of times you need that elevation. You need those moments, and those are the moments that are memorable, right? So how can you engineer those moments is what that book talks about. So Factfulness, Power of Moments. And the third one, I would actually not put a name for, but any good autobiography, and it could be anything from something like Out of My Comfort Zone by Steve Waugh, or any of the so-called business leaders like Steve Jobs or whatever. But good detailed biographies / autobiographies. Out of My Comfort Zone is an all-time favorite of mine. But yeah, any other thing, but something which is detailed and is like honest. It could be An Open by Andre Agassi. Any of these, I think are must read.
Fantastic. All right. So Ramanand and Harish, it's been awesome talking to you guys over the last hour, and I'm sure we could have gone on for another hour, talk about books and whatnot. Maybe we should do that sometime, where we pick up 4 or 5 books and go through what each of us learned out of that and what we liked, right? So before we leave you, where can people find you, and how can people access Choose to Think courses and whatnot?
So choose2think.com, think with a Q, is our like mothership website. We are on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. Similarly, CTQ Compounds, if you are looking at joining any of the compounds, CTQ Compounds is where you'll find all the compounds that are available. And we are there on, if you just search for us on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm BVHK on Twitter, Ramanand is Quattrin on Twitter. So yeah, these are all channels that anyone can find very easily.
Superb. All right, thanks guys. It was wonderful talking to you, and all the best for everything that's coming up.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Roshan. Thanks for having us here.
Thank you so much for listening. If you liked this episode, then don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite platform and share this episode with all of your fellow startup operators. Also, follow the Startup Operator on LinkedIn and Twitter for more updates. Stay safe, take care, and see you soon on a brand new episode of the Startup Operator.